Hey everyone, Curse Deck Builder, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and here we are with the 6th Doctor and Perry Brown Super Friends deck. This is a Bant deck, and this is one of our 2 donation decks that comes to us from Lexa this week. Lexa says, mentioned this a while ago, but here's my Planeswalker variant of my 6th Doctor deck. Hope you enjoy it as much as the Saga version. Thank you so much for supporting the channel, Lexa. And absolutely, I do enjoy it. I think this is a very, very good start for a Super Friends deck. I don't see a lot that I dislike, though I do have some suggestions. We have a few kind of tweaks to do and a kind of conversation on what the end game or the end goal of this deck is. But we'll get to that in a second after, we take a look at our commander. If you'd like to take a look at the deck list we're talking about today, or if you'd like to submit your own deck list to me so that I can make a video assisting your deck, please check the video description down below. So, who are our commanders for this deck, and why are they the leaders of our Super Friends deck? Well, the 6th Doctor is a 6-mana, blue-green, Time Lord Doctor, 3/3. He's got one ability that says Time Lord's Prerogative, and says whenever you cast a historic spell, copy it, except for the copy isn't legendary. This ability triggers only once each turn. Now this is a really cool ability because it doubles a lot of our spells, but the notable one here obviously is legendary. Our planeswalkers are legendary permanents, and therefore when we cast our first permanent after the 6th Doctor is out, our first legendary with the 6th Doctor out, we will get 2 copies of it. Now, let's do both commanders and then I will talk about the other idea. So Perry Brown is our supportive commander who says the first historic spell you cast each turn has Convoke. Now this one is worded a little differently. Instead of saying this ability triggers once a turn, because it's not a triggered ability, it only allows for 1 card to cost less than the rest. And since if you cast Perry Brown, you have already cast a historic spell because she herself is a historic spell, you will never get this ability on the turn she comes out. So very, very strong, but still important to consider that this is kind of a long-term plan. This works really, really well with tokens, and we're going to want to have a lot of tokens to power out at least 1 extra Planeswalker per turn, I would say. So what is the plan with these 2, and what is the plan with Planeswalkers? Let's talk about Super Friends a little bit. So to me, at least, Super Friends is a strategy that is what I would call a critical mass strategy. What that means is we've got 24 Planeswalkers here. And it is not about having a combination of the right Planeswalkers together, but it is the overall amount of Planeswalkers we're going to have. This is kind of a quantity over quality thing. Here we can see we definitely have quality Planeswalkers, or very high quality Planeswalkers, I should say. Ugin the Spirit Dragon obviously is very, very strong. Nissa, Ascended Animus can be very, very strong. Oko is extremely powerful. These Planeswalkers are very, very powerful. However, it's rare for one of them, maybe Ugin, to win the game entirely by itself. However, every subsequent Planeswalker we add gives us another trigger each turn, but another distraction, another permanent to deal with, and more headaches for our opponents. So with that in mind, this is why I would call it critical mass. Once we get enough Planeswalkers, it stops mattering what those Planeswalkers are and more what they do for us, right? What they do for us collectively. That number of triggers and that number of abilities just grows and grows. So with that in mind, I'm going to come back to the Planeswalkers to kind of pick a few of them, but having 24 Planeswalkers in a deck like this is already what I want to see. What we're going to do is we're going to go backwards. So first, as always, let's take a look at our curve. Our curve mostly makes sense. We are somewhat of a ramp deck, so this kind of longer curve goes in this direction, and it does scan. I will say we only have 4 1-mana permanents. I do kind of wish that was more, but it does make sense. We could put maybe like Utopia Sprawl or one of these Wild Growth or something to give us a little more ramp. But honestly, not that important. I think it's fine that this is lower, and our really powerful spells are here, so I do like this. Then 3 and 4 are the highest, and I'm going to take a look at, see if we can cut down some 3 and 4, just because especially 4 is very, very high, and then we kind of trickle out, which makes sense. Our lands are pretty good. We're at 36, which feels a bit low, but we do have a very large amount of ramp, so I'm pretty okay with it. And some of our ramp, notably our artifacts, can be doubled off of the 6th Doctor because they are historic, so that's pretty nice too. Now back to what I said, we're going to go backwards off of our permanent types or card types. So our Oaths are generally pretty good cards. I don't like messing with them too much. Oath of Teferi obviously is very, very strong. Oath of Ajani I think is just, it's fine. I'm not too, it's just like a reverse ramp. I think that's good. The rest are fine. I obviously like Gideon for creating bodies, and I think that's it. Deification is a bit tough. Deification is really, really good when we have a specific Planeswalker type we're building around, or Planeswalker, like the character. However, we don't have that. So instead, we're kind of playing this as a value play, right? What we'll do is use it to protect some of our stronger Planeswalkers. Nissa, Ugin are the ones that have a lot of hits. Elspeth is the one that comes to mind, and I already want to add another Elspeth for this reason, because we have the most Elspeth cards, and they tend to be very, very good. So to me, this is fine if we add to Elspeth and we're thinking about Elspeth. But right now, it does feel a little clunky. It's a card that kind of sits in your hand until you have, like, this isn't very good in neutral or when you're behind, but when you are ahead and you have your Planeswalkers out, this can be good. So I don't love it, but flavorfully, it's pretty fun. Otherwise, I think I would cut it. Obviously, the City of Death 3 Blind Mice combo continues to be very, very good, and Parallel Lives. As you might know, once we start making token copies, all of these cards get even better to create more token copies of our commanders. Now, I don't want too many doublers. Now, we only have Parallel Lives, but the other cards kind of work that way. I don't mind it so much because they all have like a floor that's good enough. City of Death creates treasures. 3 Blind Mice at least just creates mice if you're just not in, like, honestly, you don't cast this otherwise, but if someone interferes with you, at least you created a mouse token, you have something. But the rest, like, after that, I wouldn't play anymore. Like, no more, even though I would say, obviously, how would I put this? Like, Doubling Season is probably the best one we could play because it makes all of our commanders come in ready to ultimate, but that's a very expensive card, and I would only suggest it if you took out Parallel Lives, which is already an expensive card. If you're proxying it, I think that's fine, but I don't think I want another doubler. What I'm going to suggest later is we're going to double triggers a different way. Finally, the last one is Urza Assembles the Titans. This one I find a little tricky. So the idea is this, right? Like, it's the ceiling is really, really high, but the mana cost of this card is good. So why is this really good? Well, obviously it combos with our commander, so we can have 2 copies of this. We can read ahead, so we don't have to use that first ability, which I think is the weakest one, whereas the second ability I think is the strongest one. With the third one being, I mean, very, very good as well. But I would like to start on 2 and then 3 if I don't have any Planeswalkers in hand. Like, I would rather play 3 than I would play 1, especially later in the game where I need to immediately get a lot of benefit. So, okay, I'm thinking it over, and I do really like it, but I'm worried there's times this card is clunky, because if you do not have Planeswalkers, you have to put it on 1, and this card is very bad on 1. It's 6 mana to scry 4 and maybe draw 1. Now, we have a really high chance of getting a Planeswalker, but that's not worth 5 mana to me. So I do like it, but I think maybe we need to be a little pickier. Like Elspeth Conquers Death, I think I would take it out for that reason, because these two are competing at 5 drops. I want to cut down the curve a little bit. This one is just, though it's a very good card, man, I'm having a hard time saying no to this too. I guess keep them both. I'll find somewhere else to cut. Urza Assembles the Titans looks so good, and I need it to be played a bit to understand how good it is, because I feel like when it's bad, it's pretty bad, and there's a swinginess to this deck that I'm trying to deal with. We'll come back to that in a second. Okay, so Chain Veil's great, Gatewatch Beacon's fine, the Talismans are okay. I know we can double them, but we have enough ramp that I would like to cut them, and we can put more utility cards in, which I'll get to, which I didn't even put these on my list, but I'll mention them in a second. But Lightning Greaves, I don't think this is necessary. I understand this is just to protect our Planeswalker, our commander, but I don't think that's actually worthwhile. I think our opponents have enough things to be dealing with that we shouldn't be wasting our mana on this. Like, we need to slam down Planeswalkers turn after turn and not lose all of them by the turn cycle ending, right? And Lightning Greaves is not something that helps with that. It just protects our plan when our commander's out. And as you might remember, our win more kind of test involves the idea, is this card good in behind, neutral, ahead, and is it good with your commander? This is only good with your commander. It's good in neutral, it's good when you're ahead, it's terrible when you're behind, and I think that's enough that leans me into win more that I don't think it's worth playing here. Going to instants are fine, nothing to say here. Sorceries, it's not so much what's here, it's what's missing. So the ramp I do like, I have no problems with the ramp. Sylvan Scrying is notably the weakest one here. I'm sure there is a Planeswalker card. Is there a land that taps for Planeswalkers? There are, aren't they, from War of the Spark? But outside of that, I don't really see... There's not even Karn's Bastion here, which probably should be here to proliferate. But right now, I don't think there's an actual reason to tutor for a land, so I think this is the one that can be cut pretty easily. I don't even think you need to replace it with more ramp. I think you have enough. The problem that I see is missing here is we don't have board wipes. And I think we really badly need board wipes. Going back to what I said before, the main thing is when we play when we play Super Friends, we are playing a critical mass. So what that actually means in a deck like this, like, let's compare it to Aristocrats for a second. Aristocrats is good because it's also a critical mass deck, but a lot of your cards are hard to interact with. A lot of them, the Blood Artist effects, if they die, you still get a trigger, or some of them are like Bastion of Remembrance, where they aren't creatures, so they don't get targeted by regular removal. Or if a board clear comes on, you still get your end goal of a bunch of dying triggers, and you benefit from it. So it's hard to kind of mess with Aristocrats unless you have like Mass Bounce, Mass Exile, and the like. Planeswalkers are tough because when you play a Planeswalker, everyone with creatures is incentivized to attack down those Planeswalkers. You've played basically a once a turn enchantment kind of card that your opponents can attack, right? So our battle to hit that critical mass is very much so uphill. That's why I really like the Sixth Doctor here, because the Sixth Doctor represents a doubling of that, of those triggers. The further you go, right, your Planeswalkers are coming out 2 at a time, so they're more likely to stay on the battlefield, and the ones that create tokens, which I would say are the strongest ones, like Archangel Elspeth, now you create 2 tokens, which makes it even easier to defend your Planeswalkers. So with that in mind, I feel like what we're really missing here is board wipes. I don't think we have enough creatures, and I don't think even our tokens matter that much. I'd much rather have Wrath of God, Supreme Verdict, Day of Judgment, I think is like the nice collection just to start with. Because I think it's just going to be very important for you to be able to Wrath and then play a Planeswalker the same turn. I think also it's going to be very important maybe to play, the Foretell board wipe, because that one can be played for 3 mana, and that'll increase the odds of you to be able to play that then a Planeswalker. Now, you might say, but what about the Sixth Doctor? Obviously, board wipes don't work with him. We're not rushing to cast the Sixth Doctor. We have enough smaller Planeswalkers. I always mix those up. We have enough smaller planeswalkers that I think we're just fine going through that and not being too worried about, you know, getting our commander out, then slamming planeswalkers. That the first few should be fine, then we can board wipe, then we can play our commander, and then we can start doubling our planeswalkers. But there's going to be situations where you need to wipe the board even with your commander out, and it's just going to be the way it is. Actually, that's not even true. We can still just play a planeswalker, then wipe the board. We actually don't have to do it in that order. I would think of them like they're creatures. So I think that's something that's notably missing here. Looking at the creatures are fine. Rav Capuchin is a little worse when we're not in sagas. The main reason for that is that when we flash our planeswalkers in, we can't use their loyalty abilities. So we're really like end of our opponent's turn flashing them in. Like our last opponent's turn. And the main combo, if you're not aware, is the fact that with the 6th Doctor we can get, and Wrath, we can get 2 triggers of double planeswalkers, one on our turn, one on our last opponent's turn. However, once again, because they're not activating, they're just coming in, we're losing a bit of the value. And then the other thing that's really getting to me is that like if we are maxing this out, I just don't know, like our opponents just still can interact. I don't know. I'm not too much of a fan of this. I think this is 4 mana in a deck that has a lot of 4 mana cards that I'd rather cut. It's just not as impressive as Sagas, where Sagas, when they come in on your opponent's turn, they trigger, and they get to your turn, and they're triggering further, right? Mondrak. I think this is overkill. Like I mentioned before, I don't think we need this. This is much more vulnerable, even with the indestructibility clause, than Parallel Lives. I don't like the second doubling card. It just doesn't do as much. It feels like it does a lot, but it actually doesn't, because it's just a card that's taking the room, like it's taking the air out of the room of the rest of your deck. That makes it like, wow, the payoff's going to be so good. But if your opponents are just interacting with you, there's not quite a lot you can do, right? When you play Mondrak, everyone just bursts down the 6th Doctor or Mondrak, so it doesn't really matter. And because of how Mondrak works, even with the 6th Doctor, because, you know, if you cast like the Wandering Emperor and your opponent goes to destroy the 6th Doctor, you still get the trigger, right? But it doesn't work that way for Mondrak, because when you cast that second one, they'll just destroy it with it on the stack, so you won't get double. All that to say, don't play this. I don't think so. Loran also feels just a little cute. I'm not quite sure. I do get the fact that she is ETB, destroy a naturalize, and with your commander out, that's 2 naturalizes. That's fine. I guess it's card draw. I don't really think this is the kind of deck you want to play this creature in. She's a really, really good creature, but here, like, one of the big things about her is she can attack, and we can't even take advantage of those attacks. So we can basically toss her. Arena Rector is really good. Looking at our opposite, we talk about this a lot. These 2 cards, Sarah Jane Smith and Ramona II, both of them are options for alternative partners because they're both white mana. I think I tend to like Sarah Jane in the Saga deck, but here I like it a lot more. I like Perry Brown a lot more because the cards we're trying to play are just much higher mana and do enough on their own. And getting a Planeswalker and a Clue is not the same as getting a Saga and a Clue. So I think these are fine. If not a little much. Ramona II, I think I would cut her from this deck because at this point, it's really win more. Outside of our commander, we're paying 1 mana for like another 1/1, another 2/2, that kind of thing. With our commander, we are getting another copy of a Planeswalker, but like that's pure win more, right? We need our commander out, we need to be doing what we're doing, which is casting Planeswalkers, and then we need to tap with Ramona. I'm counting her as another doubler, and of your doublers, she's the weakest one. Though obviously she is exponentially strong with the doublers like Parallel Lives or Mondrak because she generates additional tokens herself. It's a lot, but I just don't think it's going to make the deck successful. It's going to make the deck spiky, and by that I mean like polarized, let's say. It makes it polarized, that when it's good, it's really, really good, and when it's not working, it just doesn't do anything. Finally, looking at our Planeswalkers before we go into additions. I like a lot of them. A few of them catch my eye as being a little weaker. Both Dovins here, I'm not too impressed by. I think, like, first of all, like, the minus is the token generation. I don't love that. And then the fact that we have to land hits with our tokens, which means we're tapping them, I don't like that. We need our tokens on defense for our Planeswalkers, so Dovin is very easily uninteresting to me. Despite being 3 mana to create tokens, I think it's still not that great. Dovin Bond, likewise, his strong ability is his -1, and it's strong in the sense that it draws you a card. This is like 3 mana Jace, if you've ever seen him, like the OG Jace Bellerin, sorry, not Berlin. Where you minus him as many times as you can to draw a card every time before you plus him, and that's not very good. And Dovin is equally not good at 4 mana, even if you have a copy of him. You play this, you copy it, every turn you draw 2 extra cards for 2 additional turns, so that turn and the turn after, and then you have to start plussing him. Unless you're targeting like really important target activated abilities, and you can't even target non-creatures, I don't think this is good. This is too much mana, not very strong, doesn't protect itself, and is also very, very weak against one of your main weaknesses, which I would say is token decks or go-wide decks. So I think this is easy to cut. Let's see. A lot of these otherwise I do like. Tamiyo is a bit tough. I think this is a political card in a way, because you have to sometimes pick your opponent's creatures, but they're not really going to let you do that. The -2, once again, is just kind of defensive against single targets, and you want to go wide defensively, not tall, I guess. That doesn't really work in this scenario. But here, I just don't think she does enough. So to me, she's weaker. Whereas her stronger version, or 3 mana version, she taps things down as her plus. Her drawing a card is really good on, like, as an instant thing to do, and I think that's fine. So I like those. Elminster, I have to read this. Draw a card, scry 2. Good old Serum Visions. I don't think this is good, right? Like, the +2's fine. A +2 of Serum Visions is honestly pretty bad. I don't particularly like cantrips. Now, it's not a cantrip because you aren't spending a card, but still. Exile the top card of your library. Create a number of 1/1 fairy dragons equal to that card's mana value. So you're basically getting rid of one of your planeswalkers to convert them into 1/1s. Is that a trade you would take, knowing, like, because the way this is supposed to go is you're supposed to use this to stack the right card on top and then exiling it. And then I have to ask you, what card in this list would you trade for that many, like, it's CMC into creatures? Because, like, Elspeth's Sun Champion, you would never trade her for 6 1/1s, right? She generates 3 1/1s as her +1. Like, why would you ever do that? And I think that's true for almost every single one of these creatures. And then when I think of his this creature's, or this planeswalker's static, like, what are you casting off of it, right? Half your instants can't be reduced. The majority of your sorceries are just ramp. I don't think you should play this. I think this is a really, really easy cut. I don't think this goes with the plan at all. It's also a very strange card. I don't know if I'm particularly a fan of it. I don't know what deck I would put this in unless I wanted them to be my commander, and I'm going to be honest, I don't particularly want that. Alright, so Karn Liberated is one. This is a card I really, really like, but I don't really like it in Commander because it's almost all downside. One, the plus isn't very good. It doesn't affect the board, so you're never going to use it. You're using this card for its minus, and when you minus, you're only taking out one it's any permanent, but it's only one of them. So you have to politics this. You have to play this. You have to talk to the table and say, hey, I'll get rid of X. And if you leave Karn around, I will, on the next turn cycle, get rid of Y, getting rid of Karn. That's not a good deal for you, but it's the only way it's going to stay around, because Karn notably has very high, its main protection is very high loyalty, and in Commander, that's not really going to do anything. So with that in mind, I don't particularly like this. The ultimate is going to lose you friends. Nobody wants to play another game of Commander with the same setup when you're ideally getting very far ahead. And it's just like very, very unlikely to ultimate this. Outside of situations where you're ultimating all of your commanders, and all of your other commanders will just win you the game. Don't play the one that restarts the game. So I think that's easy to cut. Nissa, though I said was a stronger card, I'm not sold on. I think she's fine. I don't know if this is where I want to be. Obviously she can be cast for 5, which is kind of cool, but then she comes in with 3 loyalty, which is not ideal. I think the main idea is you can play her and immediately ultimate. We are playing Yavimaya, which is technically a Sylvan Scrying tutor, but I think that's too many things to the stars have to align. I think you're probably happier with a different Planeswalker that's just generically good. Those are my thoughts on the list right now. The rest are generally fine. I obviously especially like anything that creates tokens, anything that just puts bodies on the field. I think you're going to be pretty happy. All right, let's move into additions. So the first thing I wanted to do is talk about Proliferate, because the deck is very, very counter happy. Unlike sagas, where there is a bit of a dance or a negotiation on how to proliferate, Planeswalkers don't have that problem. You always want to proliferate your Planeswalkers. So getting a few of these cards can be really good. Evolution Sage, obviously, I think is very strong here. You have a lot of ramp, and you have a few fetch lands, which is going to get you 1 to 2 proliferate triggers per turn, which is just going to be very, very strong. This is a creature that just kind of hangs around. Your opponents are going to have to use their removal on it, and generally that's removal that's not pointed at your Planeswalkers, which is nice. The other one is Flux Channeler. Almost all the same things apply, except for this one will trigger off of your other commanders, your other Planeswalkers being cast. So this is kind of nice, but this will also trigger off the ramp cards, just a little different than expected. So this is not as strong, but pretty good. The last one, which is notably absent, I think, is Ichor-Moon Gauntlet. Like, I'm sure this is just a draft and you didn't think of this, but this desperately wants to be in the deck. It is one of the strongest Super Friends cards. Turning all of your Planeswalkers into proliferations is insane, because it allows you, once you hit that critical mass, not only can you push towards an ultimate that turn when you have Ichor-Moon Gauntlet out, you also have a different kind of ultimate, which we will get back to. And that's not even just reading the second half of the card, which is just a smaller version of Flux Channeler. It only hits one thing, but it is still rather good. This card is just bonkers. And obviously we're gonna get back to this half of this because I have some things to say about it. Oh, we're there already, never mind. So, I always forget the order I put these in. So, taking another turn. This, to me, I think, is the ideal finisher for your deck. Now, let's go back to your list a little bit. What are the finishers here? There really aren't any. Urza Assembled the Titans is kind of the closest thing with its last step of getting double triggers. Ugin is not even just... Like, it is a finisher, but it doesn't finish the game. Nissa's Ultimate, if you have enough cards, maybe. Let's see. I'm looking for something that just says you win the game right away. Even Tameo doesn't. Nissa, Elminster, Take Two. So Teferi, Master of Time, and then a bunch of emblems for creatures. Okay, so not ideal. So we don't really have ways to finish the game. What we do have is ways to make an insane amount of value and then a bunch of creature tokens, right? And Time Warp effects, I think, are the best way to capitalize on that. Why? Because let's go back to Ichor Moon Gauntlet for a second just to explain it. I talked about doubling and how I don't like doubles. Like, I only want one doubling effect in the deck. And that's kind of a lie. I only want one doubling effect on each axis, where each axis, interacts with each other favorably. So a token doubler is really, really good to double your planeswalkers coming out. But that, with our commander, that only occurs once a turn. So having the token, so our commander doubles once a turn, our token doubler doubles that, and adding another token doubler, I think, kind of has a limitation. However, taking an extra turn resets both of those things. So once again, we get to double out of our commander, and then we get to double off the token again, basically putting a multiplier on the whole thing. And then obviously the fact if we are playing other tokens, such as the tokens our creatures create, we've got even more tokens in play. But this also works obviously with the proliferate, but any other planeswalker effect. So taking another turn in this deck is really, really strong. Before I go through them, the last thing I'll say is I know there's naysayers. A lot of people seem to hate mono blue taking infinite turns, to which I always think they're not taking infinite turns. They're taking just enough to beat you. So depending on your circle, you might have to be kind of picky of the ones you use and how you use them. And especially when you have Ichor Moon Gauntlet out and you have the infinite turns, I think you can just say, hey, I have infinite turns, I have enough planeswalkers, I have enough triggers, I'm going to win the game by just summoning a bunch of tokens and then attacking everyone. Is everyone good to shuffle up and concede? And if not, if they say no and they want you to play it out, just play it out. Because that's the fun. Sometimes it's fun to play it out. So Time Warp's easy, very, very standard. Same thing with Temporal Manipulation. They both do the same thing. After that, the ones that are really interesting to me are Karn's Temporal Sundering, notably because we always are able to cast it as a legendary because we should always have a planeswalker, and it is our finisher card. It's okay, this is kind of win more because it's meant to win. And this bounces something, I think it's fine. It's just cheap. That's the main reason I think about it. I wouldn't really recommend it. But the one I really, really like is Walk the Eons. Walk the Eons is the one I really, really like. Because by the time we can cast this, Walk the Eons, you should be able to buy back it at least once. Because this is probably a late game card. You've been ramping a lot, and you probably have enough extra mana to cast this, sacrifice 3 islands, use all your Planeswalker's effects, take another turn, cast this again at least once more. And then if you're feeling really good about it, maybe you can buy it back again, but that's probably by itself enough to get you the advantage to finish the game, right? This is important because it is not mana that we need, it is abilities to trigger our planeswalkers, right? The chances to trigger. And so that's what we're really pushing on. So if you can do this twice or even 3 times, you've probably won the game. And it doesn't matter that you've just destroyed your mana base because you've won the game, right? So I think this is the one I would start with because it's also spicy. No one's gonna be mad about this. No one's gonna sit there and be like, oh, you're taking infinite turns, you're blowing up your lands to do so. I think it's very much so fun, and that art is great. So I think it's great. Moving on, there's a few planeswalkers I think you are notably not playing. This just got reprinted, so I think it's gone down in price enough that even I'm probably going to pick some up. Teferi Time Raveler is a great card, mainly for the static of turning off counter magic, but that's still really nice. Getting 2 of these and minusing 3 twice is just really, really good because Teferi sticks around, hopefully has protection off of your tokens that you've generated, and just threatens to slowly tick up to do it again. Once again, we're really playing this for the static, so it doesn't matter if Teferi has one loyalty left and you've drawn some cards. I think this is much better than Dovin Bond and the like. The next one is Garruk Wildspeaker. I was kind of alluding to this when I was thinking about using Walk the Eons and other cards to ramp. This is just very, very good to make the most of the mana you have left and getting extra triggers or creating beasts. Just overall, this is, I think, one of my favorite planeswalkers. I think he just does so much that I think you should definitely be playing him. Narset, Portal of Veils, once again, a very, very strong card that just got reprinted. Just incredibly powerful. Once again, we're playing it for the static, but notably the -2 will grab planeswalkers, so you'll have 2 turns of just digging for a answer. And then through Kasmina, is it Kasmina? that or the Ichor Gauntlet, we can give her a positive and start ticking her back up. Another one that I wanted to say is Elspeth. Like I said before, I want you to play every Elspeth you can, and this Elspeth is just a little worse than the Archangel Elspeth, and that's really saying something, I will say. Like, this card is still very, very good. Interesting. Outside of a Mythic Edition, it is very, very cheap. This is a very cheap, I kind of really like this, but apparently it's the cheapest version. I would say definitely get this card. It's very, very strong. Works in so many different ways, and the emblem is not ideal, but it doesn't matter, you're just pumping out tokens. Then the last Planeswalker I want to add, because this really caught my eye, Vronos. This came from the Commander Masters Planeswalker deck, and Vronos is interesting because it phases out two other Planeswalkers, and what that does is it kind of consolidates your defenses around a single Planeswalker, which is Vronos. Especially with 2 Vronos, you can just shut off basically 4 of your other Planeswalkers just disappear for the turn cycle, which is really, really cool. And with that in mind, I think this is an interesting card. The -2 is very, very strong, especially with copies. Like, this is one of those, you're bouncing 3 things every time. This is just a very, very good card. And I think on the 5 mana Planeswalkers, this is a particularly strong one. The ultimate is interesting. It's almost a reason to keep a few of these mana rocks around, so it's easier to ultimate it, because Vronos is actually not that bad to ultimate. And I think the indestructible can't block 9/9 is pretty good at closing the game out over a few turns. Very, very cool Planeswalker. I think this is from the Duels of the Planeswalkers games. I remember this guy being everyone was excited about him. I really do like him. I wonder, is he from Innistrad? Because that looks like Avacyn's symbol, but I could be wrong. Yeah, it is, right? Like the collar. Werewolves hate that collar. All right, so last card that I thought was worth mentioning was Teferi's Talent. Now, this is another 5 mana card, and I've been trying to cut down on the higher mana cards, so take this with a grain of salt, but it is a card that I find really, really interesting, because the way this works is this solves a lot of our problems that Planeswalker decks have, where it gives you the ability to activate your loyalties on every turn as an emblem. Once you get this, you're probably winning the game no matter what your opponents do, because you're generating tokens on every player's turn. You are plussing your Planeswalkers on every player's turn. They need to planar cleansing over and over again, and it doesn't even matter because this itself is an emblem, right? Very much so. I do really, really like this. And then the thing is like, whenever you draw a card, put a loyalty counter on Enchanted Planeswalker. So here's the thing, right? This is a different kind of card, and I would like this card to be built around to an extent, right? You play this, you get it onto a Planeswalker, and then you try to immediately get them to 12 as fast as possible. Obviously, Planeswalkers that draw cards are going to be a lot better. This will get us back here. Notably, I think Teferi, Master of Time. So what does this do? Every time you plus, you're adding 2, and you can do that on each player's turn. So in a turn cycle, he'll gain 8. I think, and then you can ultimate on an opponent's turn because of how he works. I think that's the combination you want. You want Teferi, Master of Time, and then you want that enchantment on him. Obviously, it's Teferi. That's the whole idea. The other one, I think, is the other Teferi that I think you're not playing that I'm gonna go the other way actually, that generically has the ability, whenever you draw a card, put a loyalty counter on Enchanted Planeswalker, so then you get even further bonuses by drawing cards. But I think you need to build around that a little bit. This is something I would do. I would build, if I was in like mono blue or 2-color Super Friends building around Teferi, I would use Teferi's Talent with that Teferi, and that would be like the finisher where all of a sudden every Planeswalker I have has this ability, and you can just finish the game by cycling through all your opponent's turns. Everything about extra turns still applies here, and I think it is really, really good in a deck like this. just have to build around it. And I think it would work extremely well here. It's just not free. So I think I just said the same thing twice. That's gonna be the last thing I'm going to say. Otherwise, the deck is just really, really good. Thank you so much, Lexa, for sending it. I really do like it. I think Sixth Doctor, to me as a Planeswalker, it attracts me. It interests me a lot more because this is a 3-color Planeswalker deck, which once, like Sagas, has the same thing where people just want to do 5 colors, but here we're very much incentivized to be in 3. Perhaps depending on which other commander, companion we use, we have different colors here. But we're losing Elspeth. Okay. I paused because momentarily I was like, is there a better color? And I don't think there is. A lot of the planeswalking stuff, yeah, you lose a lot of the really good stuff. Okay, this is fine. Bant is the way to go. But I really do like it. I think it's very strong, and I hope this video was helpful. This is just a great deck, and yeah, I think I'd have a lot of fun sitting across from this. I will say the most important thing I think I would add, even though it wasn't in my list, is board wipes. I do see that's the place where I think you're going to be the most vulnerable, and I think that's the direction I would attack in. All right, thanks for watching. Thank you so much for watching. This video is brought to you by viewers like you and people on my Patreon. If you'd like to send me another draft of this deck, or any deck, there is a link in the video description down below. And if you'd like to make your deck one of my donation decks I work on, there's a link there too. Finally, if you'd like to like, comment, subscribe, I would be very appreciative. It helps the channel quite a bit. Thank you, and good luck in brewing and building.